America was found with a short herd around the world. Locus was found when there was no answer on the Stack Overflow. So the idea was to, get together with amazing people and build almost impossible things. If you see the movie King Richards, you will see their father had a plan of making them a tennis superstar before they were born. There's a psychiatrist, Hungarian psychiatrist by the name Mr. Polga, and he effectively committed to making his offsprings a chess grandmaster before they were born. They ended up earning the highest ever ELO ratings for a women chess player. Nurture, upbringing, your circumstances, the five people around you have a very meaningful effect in your life.
The problem with interviewing so many founders is that you eventually realize how any formula and any advice that someone gives you, there is an example of somebody who did not follow the advice and yet succeeded. A very common advice you would receive is that for a startup to get funded by VCs, you must have a tech co-founder and a sales and marketing co-founder, and that makes a good team. But today I'm speaking to Nishith, the founder of Locus, and he is one of two co-founders, both of whom are hardcore techies, engineers, geeks who like to solve problems using code and technology. And yet they have built a business with multi-million dollar ARR, global revenues, average contract values of $1 million a year. So, which means one single customer is paying them $1 million a year for their software. Their way of building the business, how they did it, was extremely first principles and counterintuitive, which is why I love this conversation. I'm your host, Akshay Datt, and you're listening to the Founder Thesis podcast. So, Nishit, welcome to the Founder Thesis podcast. We were just chatting a couple of minutes back when you said in the nurture versus nature debate, you come on the side of nurture. What do you mean by that?
So, during parenting, there's a huge discussion, and I recently became a parent. I had my first child 6 months back. Was blessed with her, right? And so I again started discussing it with my father, who's a psychiatrist, and there's something we have been debating for a long time whether whether in a child it's nature or whether it's nurture, right? And I think also as a founder mentality, someone who likes to believe that my circumstances are a manifestation of my own actions. As a family, we are very certainly in the nurture camp, and then there are good examples about it. So very famously, for example, if you see the movie King Richards, right, based on the Serena and Venus Williams life, you will see their father had a plan of making them a tennis superstar before they were born, right? Similarly, there's a psychiatrist, Hungarian psychiatrist by the name Mr. Polga, right? He's a big proponent of this debate, and he went into on the nurture side, and he effectively committed to making his offsprings a chess grandmaster before they were born. The Polga sisters not only went on to become the chess grandmasters, they went on to become the current world champions, and not just current world champions, they ended up earning the highest ever ELO ratings for a women chess player historically, right? So yeah, we strongly believe that nurture, upbringing, your circumstances, the five people around you have a very meaningful effect in your life.
What made you an entrepreneur? What kind of nurturing made you an entrepreneur?
My parents are doctors, and they were very encouraging. I was a kid. I was the little kid with a screwdriver in his hand, right? I would like literally go around the home disassembling things, inspecting them, right? And they were extremely supportive of that, right? My father was a psychiatrist in a government hospital, so we didn't come from a lot of money, right? And yet I never heard anything about, oh, if you have damaged this, oh, you have damaged that. So they were extremely supportive of me exploring things, me trying out new things. They were extremely supportive of me not getting going into medical science and being more into the engineering side, right? So for me, entrepreneurship is primarily a proxy to building things, right? And my parents definitely encouraged me to be a builder, right? They got me the right tools. We had a computer before we had an air conditioning in our house, right?
Wow.
And I was raised in Delhi, and I think that's a tough sacrifice for a family to make, right? And I think that that went on a long way in establishing what are priorities for me, right? Encouraging me being a builder, and that's how I actually ended up becoming a hardware hacker. And in Locus office, we still have a hardware lab, even though we are
When
a
did you
enterprise
become a
software company.
hardware hacker? Like this was in Bits Pilani. Your engineering was from
Uh,
Bits Pilani.
my
So,
engineering was in Bits Pilani, but this I'm referring to more around my high school days, right? So during
oh,
my high school days, I used to build bots interfaced with the parallel port because that was the most simple port. Then we moved on to USBs and all. Yeah, so this is I'm more talking around my high school days and pre-engineering.
hmm. So
And
from
that
Bits you
time,
sorry.
yeah. No, I was just saying that I went to a school in Delhi, Mothers International, which was right opposite the IIT Delhi campus, and IIT Delhi used to have their tech fest with robotics events and all, and that was like my first taste of it, and then I got addicted to it.
Hmm, fascinating. So from Bits you joined Amazon. I am assuming Amazon would have also had some role in your in shaping you as an entrepreneur, because that culture is known
Absolutely,
to be famously entrepreneurial.
yeah. So Amazon had a significant role in not whether we become an entrepreneur or not, but once we became an entrepreneur, what were some of the things we also incorporated in our organization, right? So Amazon has 14 principles, which they nurture in every joining. Some of them we have definitely ported to Locus as well. So for example, one of them is bias for action, right? That don't suffer from a bystander effect, even if it's outside your role. Take action, right? Similarly, another one is disagree and commit, where effectively, you can have a lot of disagreement during the stages of discussion, but once we have all combined reached a rational discussion, then everyone's committed towards making that decision, a success. Nobody can say, oh, but initially I said something else, right? So
No, I
Amazon
told
had a
you
very,
so.
yeah, exactly. No, I told you so. Right? Very well said. Right. So just I think a more professional articulation of that, and that has become a very very meaningful tenet at Locus, right? Because in a startup, you're often making with sufficient data but still incomplete data decisions. Right?
Okay. Uh, what made you quit Amazon and start something on your own?
So often people think that it's because I was missing something in my job, right? It was actually quite the opposite, right? I was very fortunate to both work in the AWS team. Then within the AWS team, I was working on the AWS machine learning team. Then within the AWS machine learning team, I was working on the science aspects of it, right? Almost all of my colleagues were PhDs. Half of my colleagues were SCDs or had a second PhD, right?
What is a
So it was a
SCD?
doctorate of science. So this is like
Okay.
after PhD,
Okay. Okay.
right?
Hmm,
Or they had like a second PhD, right?
hmm,
So it was a brilliant academic environment. There were lots of great discussions, right? And we also kind of had like a carte blanche on the budget, so it was a great life. The I was more on the research side, so there were less delivery pressures and all. Also, there was a lot of learning opportunities, right? Uh,
What was the
but
use
at
case
that
of
time,
this machine learning? Was it for powering the e-commerce arm of Amazon, or like?
so both. So we were working on both building the algorithms for the AWS machine learning platform itself, as well as this group used to run a small, effectively like an internal machine learning consulting for any other group in Amazon who would want to. So, for
Hmm,
example, one of the problems we were working on that time was standardizing shoe and slipper sizes across brands,
hmm.
right? To have
Okay.
better customer experience. So
Hmm,
things like
hmm,
that.
hmm, hmm.
Then, of course, catching fraud and so on and so forth, right? But
Okay.
we were also working on the platform team. But at that point, so one of the mottos at Locus is to invent the future with amazing people, right? And at that point, I thought that we could still work on more future forward stuff. We could still work on things which everyone wants but says it's impossible currently. And effectively, that's what made me quit Amazon to start my own. Wanting to start my own had also been a long-standing desire, and that's why when we the first hiring post of Locus was America was found when with a short herd around the world. Locus was found when there was no answer on the Stack Overflow, right? So the idea was to get together with amazing people and build almost impossible things.
So just to translate this for a non-techie, no answer on Stack Overflow means
Yeah,
that code has
right.
not been written for that particular. Like
Before,
Stack
right?
Overflow
There's
is a
no
code sharing platform,
code
basically.
sharing thing, right? Yeah, in the pre GPT world, right? The
Yeah.
Chat GPT have slashed its traffic by half, but yeah, in the
Okay.
pre GPT world, yes.
Yeah. Now instead of going to Stack Overflow, you'll just ask ChatGPT to write the code for whatever you're looking for.
It's a bit different, right? I'm an absolute lover of what these LLMs and Chat GPTs have done to for programmers, right? Because it's actually made programming a lot of fun. So so right now, if previously a great engineer was a 10x engineer, now a great engineer is clearly a 100x engineer,
Wow.
right? What it has made hard is to be an average engineer, right? That's where it's competing. But if you were a good engineer, a great engineer, right, you could define things, you could delegate out. Now we see even within the organization, one person finishing things which would have typically taken three good folks about a week, right? And a lot more time is spent now in understanding the customer requirements, and a lot of boilerplate stuff is templatized out. So yeah.
Fascinating. So, okay, what was it?
I would like to quote Ben Affleck here, right? And he articulated it really well that AI is a craftsman, and it's very important to have good craftsmen, right? A craftsman knows how to do what, right? And AI as a craftsman can typically do more than a human do, right? But the art in the human is to know when to stop, right?
Hmm,
So that's how you have to look at the whole LLM piece. That it's a
hmm,
great craftsman, and you are the art that brings meaning into the project.
hmm.
Right?
Okay.
So you need to define it really well what you want to do and how you want to do. And now instead of struggling by about hiring craftsmen and all, you now have like a mechanized craftsman who can help you execute things.
Hmm. Right. Okay. Okay. So, coming back to the birth of Locus, what was that journey like? So, you quit Amazon. Did you have
Yeah,
a product idea in mind that I want to build this? What was version one that you built? How did you sell it?
yeah. The first version of Locus had nothing to do with Locus. It was a product called RideSafe, and it had completely arisen out of my personal needs. So let's dial back to 2014. Further, I would say around the end of 2014, um, we had a infamous incident in India, the Nirbhaya incident, and a couple of them similarly. And these incidents were close to us. My father was actually involved as a post-traumatic specialist in some of them. I also have a elder sister, so this topic just cut very close to the bone, right? And at that time, there used to be this advertisement about a app where if you shake the app, it will send an SOS alert. Right? There was a very famous Bollywood star who would advertise it for a product, right? And I thought that app was a security theater. What I mean by that is it creates a false sense of security, right? Because if you're in a cab and you are in trouble and you know you are in trouble and you can actually get to your phone, why would you shake it? Why would you not press redial or something? Right? The problem that happens is you typically don't know you are in trouble by the time you're already in a trouble. So what we did was we analyzed patterns, right? With the help of my father and a few public officials, we got on past data, we analyzed patterns, and we realized in all of these incidents, the one common thing is that the driver takes the victim to an unsafe location. That location is typically not on your route, right? So we went on to build this small algorithm called real-time route deviation detection. It abbreviates to R2D2, so it was a tribute to that. What it would do is, say like you're leaving from airport and you put your home destination, right? Now, regardless of what exact way you take, sometimes you want to take your favorite way one, favorite way two, the app constantly monitors your current location and takes an intelligent decision if it is in the direction to your home or towards an unsafe place, and then it alerts you. If you don't react, it makes your phone ring, and that's how then the driver knows that. So we have actually had a few few true positives on it, and that always helps me sleep really well whenever I'm troubled. So that's how we started Locus. But during 2015 start, if you remember, everything was becoming click a button and get me something, right? So you had on demand coffee, on demand flowers, on demand food, right? Both Bangalore and San Francisco were like, assisted living communities for youth. You press a button and something happens. For that something to happen, it needs complex logistics behind. But these were built by product experts, not logistics experts. So the same algorithms that we used for tracking the location, monitoring the location, determining whether it's safe, what is the right route, we transposed all of them into an enterprise package, and we became a one-stop shop for these startups who wanted to create an on-demand service to connect from their order management and make sure their customers are getting a great experience. So that's how through the 2014 and 15 we pivoted into an enterprise app, starting from a very personal B2C application.
Was monetization a reason to do the pivot? But I'm sure R2D2 would not have been monetizable.
Absolutely. And I would like to actually at first, thank my investors toward it. They put us no pressure towards monetization, right? If
So you
anything,
raised funds
Locus is
for
the monet.
R2D2.
Pardon?
You raised funds for R2D2.
Yes. So after we had launched RideSafe, Manish Singhal, who now runs Pi Ventures, he saw me present RideSafe in one of the startup forums, and he spotted us, and that's how we went into a fundraise journey. As we raised these funds, our investors were very clear that this is a great product, but we don't know what's the exact way it will be monetized. But right now, here is some money for both of you to keep on building. So by that time, it was just my co-founder and I. We had hired no team members, right? And as we found this opportunity that we can actually transform this B2C app into this B2B application for this entire on-demand economy, they were extremely supportive. And at this point, Sheetal from GrowX, and now he runs Mirac Ventures, he joined in, and we converted the B2C idea into B2B during that fundraise itself. And that's how we did our first 250K back in 2015.
Uh, who was the first customer you sold it to?
One of the first customers we sold it to was Urban Ladder and Fresh Menu,
Okay, okay.
right? The
Both.
furniture startup Urban Ladder. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Both of whom were running their own delivery services, and hence
Yes, back then.
this.
Yes. So we,
Oh,
we, we were the one optimizing it for them.
this was a product or a service that you sold?
This has always been a product.
Okay.
In our first version, if anything, it was just a business to developer product where we were only primarily selling APIs. Then we realized our clients actually prefer an end application, and then we became like a proper enterprise SaaS product. So we always provide primarily only a product, and we also don't get into operations. That's our client's business, right? So, for example, we would work with somebody like Blue Dart, but we will not start our own transportation company.
Hmm. The business to developer API that you were selling, what was it doing? What
Yes.
was the input and output?
Yeah, so the business to developer APIs were that, if you want to build your own routing systems, own tracking systems, you could use us as an infrastructure play, right? So during that time, there was Twilio, who was doing this for telecom authorities. There was Stripe, who was doing this for banking authorities, right? But we realized when we sell an API stack, we are effectively only abstracting like the Android location manager or the iOS location service, and an end, we are not really abstracting out a tough regulatory authority for you to talk to, which is what say Stripe or Twilio was doing with banking and telcos, right? We were not doing that, so it made more sense for us to convert into an end application over a pure infrastructure play, right? And that's where, so today we are effectively one of the leading transport management systems specializing in last mile.
Okay. What? Just help me understand. You said infrastructure for managing logistics was what the API was providing. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, what are the components in that?
um, so let's say if you wanted to do routing, right, we would provide you an API where you can upload all the locations and we will give you a route. but there was no screen to visualize it. There's no screen to edit it, right? Then there are no screens to
The output would be
configure.
numbers, like the lat long code.
Output would be numbers, right? Input
Okay.
are numbers, outputs are number in a sequence of the things. But the user of that thing then further needs to take those numbers, build a dashboard, build a mobile app, give it to the end user of the driver, right? Because that output is not end consumable by the user of the product. It may be consumable by the buyer of the product,
Mm.
right? So in our space, in our experience, it made sense to make more an application. Then once we were making an application, we realized given we are an optimization system over just a system of records, we save in percentages. If you are saving in percentages, it makes sense to have a large absolute base to save on, right? So that the absolute value is sufficient enough for you to indulge in change management. And hence, then when we started becoming an application, we decided to become a purely enterprise application, having the right security standards, having the right global deployments.
Okay. What are the other components? I want to kind of go into the nuts and bolts. So one is route optimization. What else? What are the other components? You said real time tracking was something you provided.
Definitely. Right.
Hmm.
So we started with route optimization, and that was our Trojan horse, right? That was our core kernel. That was our, competitive edge. We had and have the best on-ground route optimization in the industry. It's widely recognized as such. What makes it best? Three things. One, how closely it can model your real world. So even before speed or anything, right? Because the problem in route optimization is not that let's have 100 trucks and 1,000 packages what to do, right? Let's take a very simple example of distributing wedding cards, right? So I want to come to Mr. Nipun, who lives next to Mr. Akshay. But Mr. Nipun is available only at 9 a.m. But Akshay will be available to me only after 4 p.m. post his poker game. Now, what should I do? Should I ping Akshay to reschedule? Should I send two? Should I come in? Should I send my aunt to deliver at 9 a.m. and me come at 4 a.m.? Or should I make a route that starts at 9 a.m. there, ends back at 4 p.m. here, right? Oh, but when I've decided to do that, I have realized that there's also Mr. Agarwal that I should give sweets to. But Mr. Agarwal lives in an area where only a two-wheeler it's actually convenient to go, right? But from there, I need to also go to Nishith, and Nishith lives in an area where, if I take a non-electric vehicle, I have to pay a surcharge, right? And these are only illustrative examples. Your actual production use cases have often over 100 constraints, right? And it actually sounds like a rap song. So the biggest problem in a route optimization engine is to actually model the real world scenario. And then the second and third factors, how fast you can get your output, and then how optimized is your output, right? Obviously. So those are the three things that makes. And that was our starting point. Then once we made the route optimization engine, we needed to know whether it's working. How do you know it's working? You have to track its execution. So we built an execution engine. We added tracking to it. But then we realized what's our mission? Our mission is to move any person or any package between 2 points without human decisions, right? So why should you have a person sitting on top of a control tower? So we built a great alert infrastructure. So even we have this god view mode where sometimes we'll kick our legs, put it on the table, have a beer, and just see like bunch of thousands of vehicles moving from here and there, right? But is that really useful? It's cool, but is that really useful? What is someone looking at that screen? Can we automate that itself? So then we built one of the best control tower interfaces where you can not only monitor everything, or you can pre-code your actions, you can connect them with your next systems, right? As we did this, we realized there's a lot of stuff that happens between an order when you purchase an order and it's ready to be dispatched to its actual dispatch, right? There is quality control that happens, there is documentation that happens, maybe multiple orders get combined, maybe the order gets weighted, right? So there's a lot of stuff that happens within the four walls of a hub between the point your order has been decided to be dispatched and it's actually dispatched. So then we build the entire managing systems for that. Then some of our leading customers like Unilever, where we operate in more than 9 countries, right? They started asking us that, hey, you do this last mile piece really well. can you start jumping into n minus 1, right? So we started building the mid mile and the first mile interfaces. As we did this, one of the core architectural changes we had to do was, we had previously designed the system for any one leg of the journey, right? So now we became a true multi-leg system, right? Effectively, we are now a full-fledged competitive transport management system, starting from the point your order is created. And now, actually, for some of our retailers, we are going even before that. Have you ever noticed that when you're checking out on Amazon, sometimes whether you check out or not check out is dependent on the delivery options, right? If you're getting it tomorrow, you may check out, right? So your checkout today is delivery linked. So we have now started building delivery link checkout and promise engines, right? So effectively on your product page itself, we will power in low latencies, that by when can you get it? What are the various channels you can get it, right? Because today both websites are like real world stores, as well as your stores are like your real life website, right? A customer journey in retail could start offline, finish online, could start online, finish offline, and it all needs to be managed across a seamless logistics. So that's effectively the value that we now have morphed into, right? So we operate with clients for whom last mile is important, but we can take a large part of their supply chain from the distribution side. We don't do anything in the procurement side.
Okay, fascinating. I'm going to go a little deeper
So
on.
yeah, so this gives you the breadth, and
Yeah,
now we can start zooming into the each areas.
yeah. I love going into the weeds. I should warn you. Okay,
Amazing.
so
As a person responsible for product and engineering, that's music to my ears.
okay, good to hear that. Um, the base, the Trojan horse is route optimization, for which what you do better than anyone else is real world constraints. How
Modeling.
did
Modeling, yes.
real world modeling? How did you get that data? How did you get the data that this is a two-wheeler zone, for example, or this is a zone where if you're not going in an EV, then you have to pay a surcharge or whatever? Like, how did you get that data?
Absolutely, right. And there's no silver bullet. So we will scan map. We have multiple maps licenses. We spend seven-digit dollars on them annually, right? We latch onto municipal data. We also, at any given day, probably during the course of this conversation, would have visited another quarter million unique locations, and probably more than a couple million locations just today, effectively giving us over a billion new locations every year.
When you
And
say we would have visited, it means that
by it's the
not just
software. I'm
us. Right.
yeah, exactly, the
Sure.
Locus systems, not
Right.
right, like
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
uh, right, so there's a lot of execution data that you derive it from.
Hmm.
And then the third, fourth, and the most important source of data, your clients. Your clients know what they want. They didn't have a system before to model it. Let me give you a great example in Mumbai, right? So in Mumbai, you have this Andheri line, right? The railway line running through the city, right? And what previously the systems would do is that, let's say if you're crossing that line, they will add 7 minutes of transaction time, so that at least you're waiting. So that was step one, right? But if you have a route where the driver is constantly going left, right to it, they get frustrated, right? Like, why am I delivering only six item if the other guy is delivering 16, even if they're getting paid the same, right? So there's attrition. So we actually had to come up with a system that you can, in your route, you will only cross the line once. Because if you're delivering to this sides of the home, it's fine. If you're delivering it, you will go once, deliver all of them, and come back. We will
Hmm.
never create a route which is like this,
Hmm.
right? And sometimes we would actually have, A1 printouts of local maps, and we would ask our clients to mark, right? So, for example, in Mexico City, the core central arterial road every Saturday and Sunday for 2 hours becomes a cycling track. So you got to divert all the shipments away from that road, right? Otherwise, you will never have accurate ETS, right? Similarly, now we've also built systems where we scan for local news, local weather, sporting events, right? So, for example, if we know there's a big match that has ended outside Chhatrapati Shivaji Stadium, we would mark it as a high traffic area, right? would do the same if Red Sox finish something at the Fenway Park.
Okay, fascinating.
Right.
What does this?
So you know, so Locus sits on effectively adding another nine in everything. What I mean by that is, it roughly takes the same effort to do anything to the first 90%, then from 90 to 95, then from 95 to 99, then from 99 to 99.9. But
Yeah.
at three nines, it becomes useful in production. Because, if you're dispatching 40,000 orders, every 3 hours from a dispatch center in Southeast Asia, 0.1% of orders, that's like 400 orders. What do I do about them? Right. That's 400 angry Twitter messages to sort for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fascinating. Okay. Um, the execution engine is like a big part of your data collection as well, then, from what I understand. So, is
Yes,
it like
absolutely.
how, if you are getting a route through Google Maps, it allows you to report if there is a problem in the route? So, is
Yeah.
it
So
something like
we don't ask for manual interventions. We derive it automatically using accelerometer and GPS data, because we have commercial drivers using our product. They are extremely tight on bandwidth. Our entire product is designed to reduce the number of interactions they have to do over increase.
that? So, the mobile app will show them the route, which is
The
powered by
mobile
you?
mobile
Or,
apps and shows them the, yes, which is found by us,
okay,
right?
they don't need to
So
use Google
previous
Maps as such.
No,
Your
they
app
don't need to use
will.
Google.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly, right.
Okay.
And sometimes we would also offload it off to the Google Maps, right? Our value is not, telling the
Navigation.
from point A to point B to go. Our
Hmm.
value is telling what is the point A and what is the point B. And if
Got
you're going from point A to point B, should you be avoiding something specifics based on which you would have calculated the original route?
Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah.
And then if there is like if he's at one place for 5 minutes, then automatically
Yeah.
your
We
system would
can
pick up that there is
exactly. And
something
then
wrong.
sometimes, we can generate an alert. Sometimes we can let it be, sometimes we can count it as a, so even things like, I'll give you another example, which our drivers really like, that in every other system, often their lunch break is configured, say between 1 to 2 or whatever, some fixed time window, right? But they're like, in practice, that's not how I do it. I have my lunch anytime between 12 to 3, when my last job finishes and my next job has some time, right? So now that's how we route it. So you can give us a time window in which to slot an hour lunch. And then what we'll do is, in that window, whenever a job is finishing, we'll wait, we'll add that slack and then add to the time to the next and then create the optimized routes. Right. So
Hmm.
drivers can feel the satisfaction of having, right? Otherwise, what happens is they're like, hey, I'm having lunch and I know that order is getting delayed, right? It's just a stressful situation.
Right,
Because
right, right.
not that they were not right, because the product never empathized with the user. It only empathized with the buyer,
Hmm.
right? But your adoption will never work if you don't empathize with the user.
How did you empathize with the drivers? You have no context of a driver's life.
We Even before we wrote the first line of code, I would have trailed hundreds, if not thousands, of or drivers. In every city there are these chai sutta corners where all the drivers assemble. I spent countless hours there. If on these long routes, you will often see, drivers sometimes sleeping under the truck because that's the only shaded kind of thing. Yeah, I've been a part of that entire thing.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and then once we obviously launched the product, then I would have easily done 1,000+ deliveries for all my clients, right? So yeah, it's a lot of direct user interview. Right? If anything, like, I keep telling especially my UX team, that your primary purpose is to be the voice of the user in the system, right? Like, that guy has no voice, right? We get a lot of very, very human feedback sometimes, Akshay. Like, I remember in this one warehouse once in Bombay, right next to the airport. I went, and typically I take off my jacket when I'm entering a warehouse, but that time I was still wearing my dinner jacket and also, and I was looking at the Locus product. So somebody understood that probably I'm someone senior from Locus, and this guy tentatively approached me, and I'm like, "Hi, can I?" Right, like, and he basically said that because now, his sorting time is reduced and the routes are he is actually able to finish his route on the specific time. He's able to take his 7 p.m. local over the 9 p.m., and he finally gets home to see his kid awake. So after 4 years of his kid attending school, he knows which class he is in. right?
Wow.
What subjects he's studying. And yeah, that was amazing to
Mm.
hear, right? Because those people don't have a voice in the system, right? It's very easy to not have transparency over them, for them to not get their fair pay.
You see the driver as your primary user?
No. So he's one of the key users, but we have three sets of users equally important. One is our dispatcher, right? So dispatcher plus customer service. So for us,
Dispatcher is
often
the
we
guy in the warehouse
the
or
guy, yeah, accountable for dispatching the routes. And these days what we have seen in many of our clients is those dispatchers have actually been elevated into customer service and customer relationship folks. And then the third is the management, for whom we have the entire network design, the analytics, the leaderboards, the cost reports, right? So
the control tower?
effectively, yeah, yeah.
Mm. Uh, do you also help them in?
Not just the control tower, right? That's on the just monitoring the execution, but also the decision making. Think of it this way: today, say which driver often gets the most profitable route. That traditionally goes between the relationship of the warehouse dispatcher and the driver. That is not good for anyone, not the organization, not the rest of the drivers, not the transporter, except for those two individuals, right? Similarly, then within the organization itself, across 8 dispatch centers, I may have different methodologies. I may not have a central, I may not even want to have central, but I may want to have a central control over each of those 8 methodologies. So today, with your analytics team and our routing team, you can sit and create those routing configurations and options, which will then work not just throughout the countries, but in larger accounts throughout multiple countries. Some places you may be doing your own deliveries, some places it's outsourced, right? So it's a great tool to have centralized control and visibility over massively distributed operations.
Mm. Yeah, in fact, my question was going to be somewhat related to this. There are many different ways in which drivers can be compensated. You could have a vendor who has a single truck, like a driver come owner, or you could have a driver who's paid per parcel, or you could have a driver on a fixed salary plus incentive, or you
Yeah.
could have a vendor who has multiple vehicles to whom you are offloading. How do you help companies deal with this complexity?
We offer them an option to run all. We have learned the hard,
And you take the data of how much is costing, how much is each mode costing?
yeah, everything should be made as simple as possible. That's only a half quote. The entire quote is everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler, right?
Okay.
So on our first day, we tell all our clients that we are a non-opinionated platform. Why? Because now we work with large enough clients that just one client across their multiple states or multiple countries are operating in completely different models of logistics. So at one place where they have captive logistics, where they're running their own trucks, their drivers may also be on their payroll, right? With an overtime charge. So our thing would be to make sure that we are bringing back the drivers within the time, right? Or to utilize all the trucks, because the drivers are anyway on the payroll, so minimize the operational hours or minimize the number of trucks. That same country in another thing could be doing it at a per package level, where they don't have enough density, right? Then they in the third state may be operating where they lease a truck, right? And then decide what should be the route of the truck, and then you are being paid by the distance and thing. So our platform allows you to manage each of these modes and many more.
So at the time of onboarding, you kind of collect all this data,
Yes.
like the different
Yes,
cost
it's
structures.
not a day zero product, right? It's an enterprise product with an account management. There's a lot of integrations as well, right? With some of our large clients, our integrations often take over a couple of months, right? And we would integrate into SAPs. Yeah, we have integrated into stuff written in IBM mainframe, COBOL, flat files, ELDs, right?
Hmm. Okay, fascinating. Uh, so, do you also Help them
Like
manage the
today,
vendor invoicing, this is
yes,
the.
we have just yeah, we have I should hire you as my product manager, right? First of all, prior to this, no one has asked. When you say that you love getting into weeds, a lot of people say this, but you actually demonstrated that by going into how drivers are incentivized, right? Like that's a genuine attempt at understanding the problem statement, right? So I would first call you out there. Um, Second, now you took it to an absolutely right point of finance recon and all. So we limit ourselves on not dispersing the actual payment, right? So we are not a payment system. But now, because effectively, which vendor should you use? That should also be dependent on your cost contract. Because let's say a vendor may seem expensive for today, but you have not met its monthly minimum quota. So if you don't use that vendor, instead of spending 10 extra rupees today, you might end up spending 200 rupees at the month end on their penalty quota. So we actually factor that also now into our cost calculations on how should you be routing. And how should you be routing involves with who should you be routing. But now I know what's exactly in your head. That's the LHS, the left hand side of the equation. So then once the execution is done, right? And let's say we predicted a route X, but the driver had to take X dash for whatever reasons, right? And their billing may be a bit different, billing may. So they will upload an invoice. We will also then help you reconcile these invoices,
Hmm.
right? And there we are now adding more and more intelligence that, previously it had to be a very structured invoice. Now we are going over to scanning paper invoices. And yeah, that's the idea that because what we learned from working with now tier one public market companies, even in India, is that nobody wants to really delay vendor payments. That's a mentality of the past. Most of our clients are growth companies. Their problem is that they don't have efficient, reliable transportation vendors. If to their good vendors they pay on time, they stick with them even over a discount, right? So many of my tier 1 customers in India, all of them public market companies, have explicitly told me that, Nishit, regardless of whatever you hear in the market, our primary aim is to pay our transportation vendor on time. If I can pay them on n minus 1 day, I want that. I don't want to make a float on this amount. What is costly for me is not to have a transportation vendor and that impact my sales.
Hmm. Interesting. So logistics seems to be a supply starved market.
Absolutely.
Okay. Maybe eventually the vendor need not even do invoicing outside of Locus. You
That's
could
the idea. That's the
handle.
idea, right? You finish it, it generates, everyone accepts it, it's done.
Mm. Okay, okay, okay. Fascinating. Okay. Okay. Help me understand what is the control tower? What does that do? From the management perspective.
Maybe not from management perspective, right? So control tower is what helps you in your transactional stuff, right? So fundamentally, control tower is monitoring about live, right? So let's say if I'm operating in three countries, uh, let's take like three countries. Let's take a small footprint, say 20 states, 10,000 vehicles, right? Uh, One of my dispatch centers haven't dispatched out anything 1 hour after they had to be dispatched. How would I know, right? Because typically, you understand, right? Like from someone who has to know, from the someone who has to take an action, there are probably eight people involved in this chain. Assuming each of them have an immediate intent to also inform, it will still take over 1 day, right? Or till the customer escalates, right? So first, control tower helps you get alerted. That was phase one. But now, if you have been using our control tower for a few months or a few years, we also allow you to encode your actions. That, let's say, for a B2C company, if my customer order is getting delayed more than 5 minutes, but less than 15 minutes, send them an apology message with a 5% discount code. So that can also be automated back, right? So the control tower is primarily now involved into delivering exceptional customer experience, right? If a customer, so for example, even the interface, right? Now, one of the things I really hate when I call any customer service center is they ask me nine different things, right? Your name, your this ID, your that ID. I'm like, you know the number I'm calling you from, right? Like, make some intelligent guess, right? So exactly how you have in Chrome, where you type on the URL bar any part of the URL or search term, it brings up. That's what we now have on our control tower. That you can literally type anything about that order and all the matching so that you can quickly get to the order and inform the customer. Because see, the customer has already skipped past the tracking link, right? So the customer is already troubled. That time, don't try and make a ration card for the customer. Get to his answer.
Right. Okay. 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 And got it. Okay. You also power the data which the customer gets, like a tracking link which they get, that information on that tracking link, like say on Amazon it shows you to track your order, so stuff like that also
Absolutely.
you would power for your
Yeah,
brand.
so we get a tracking link. That tracking link actually doubles up as a few things, right? It also works up as a safety mechanism in certain countries for certain products. That tracking link has the face and name of the driver detail, right? So the
Okay.
customers are used to only opening if it's matching,
Mm,
right? That customer link also has an ETA, and then it can also have an OTP. So if you want like a handshake delivery, right?
mm, mm,
That customer link, yeah, you could also sign, and then that become, the moment you sign a package, you will get an email with your signature embedded and proof of delivery, right? Then proof. I'll give you a very cool example of how today AI is getting embellished in itself, right? So often you would see drivers taking a photo, leaving a package outside the gate, right, as a proof of delivery. Now in that they are always trained to take the number of the house in that thing, right? So now what we have started doing is automatically started extracting out that number, matching it with the number on the package, and both immediately alerting the user also and immediately alerting the backend also. Because half the time it's not actually fraud. Like the guy just literally picked the wrong package and kept to your door, and the packages got swapped between the neighbors, right? And then if it's valid, then that proof of delivery is also authenticated, so it just reduces the back office job a lot.
mm.
So yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So
Like from
any
the
place where we have basically unstructured data, and in logistics you have a lot of unstructured data,
mm,
the more the 2024 LLMs and AI systems are effectively helping it convert into structured sets.
fascinating. I guess the two big pain areas for D2C brands are the RTO, which is like when an order goes back, and
The
cash on delivery. Do you support in solving these pain areas?
Yeah, we absolutely. So we do both cash out deliveries and return optimizations, right? For return optimizations, one of the coolest things we did is for this apparel brand, and they offer 3 hour returns, right? Now on the surface, it would look like an insane cost. 3 hour return, right? You raise a return request during working hours, not 24/7, right? The trick is we actually, so let's say if the delivery starts from 8 a.m., right, the returns are only started from 10 a.m., right? So between 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., all your delivery executives now have some latent capacity. This company is only doing apparel delivery, so the transaction cost of delivering picking up is very little, right? So now we find the nearest driver who both has some latent capacity in the bag and also latent time, right? Some time slack to meet the next order. And we add this return request there, right? So your total landed cost barely increased. And what you could offer is effectively a service where customers can order a lot more stuff at far fewer friction to cart conversion and easily return it,
Mm,
right? And just that confidence a customer gets by being able to return something today and today, it's amazing,
mm. Right. This try before
right?
you buy kind of
Yeah,
a.
yeah. So the brand managers mention about how people wear the clothes they bought only after the stuff they didn't want got returned.
Mm,
So there's very clearly some safety security mechanism happening in your mind, right? So
mm,
that was on the RTO piece.
mm.
Um, what was the other thing you mentioned on the
Cash on
D2C
delivery.
brands? The
Cash on
cash
delivery.
on delivery,
Yeah. Like
right? So
brands
cash on
want to
delivery,
reduce cash on delivery, right? They want more orders to
yeah.
be prepaid. Do you support in that? Like,
So we would not be a helpful solution for somebody wanting more orders to be prepaid, right?
mm,
That's falls outside of our purview. We handle the cash on delivery orders. So for example, and not just D2C, like one of our big customers, Big Basket, also has cash on delivery. So yeah, so we would do the cash on deliveries. We would help you reconcile the cash at the end. If you have like a disbursement system, we will link it with that as well. So that after end of the day, when the driver has already spent the entire day delivering orders, he's not waiting half an hour in line to sort out his cash, right?
Hmm.
And just that adds a lot of happiness to them, right? How you end your day impacts how you think about your day, right?
Hmm.
So there's a head of supply chain at Big Basket, ex head of supply chain KBN, Mr. Nagaraju, and he came up with this idea, and that's how we sing this all together. And the driver happiness increased tremendously.
The problem with cash on delivery often is that those orders are often frivolous. Like
Yeah,
I mean, the delivery actually doesn't happen, and
yeah,
the executive ends up having to take it back or whatever.
absolutely. Yeah.
So do you
I think
like?
with UPI now,
Hmm.
cash on delivery, we are seeing at least in our transaction volume is slowly getting to a point where brand managers are choosing not to go with that, at least in the urban centers.
As in, they have
Yeah.
stopped offering this on the checkout
Yeah,
page.
or even if they're offering, the volumes are minimal in the eight cities in India.
Ah, okay, 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 okay.
You would actually now in Bangalore see shops which says no cash, only UPI. Right.
Mm,
This is
mm,
I saw it for the first time in my last visit. This is actually post COVID extremely common in UK,
mm,
which is like card only systems.
mm.
But yeah, now we are starting to see a bit of that because even for like a small shopkeeper, just managing that change is not, and there's a lot of pilferage in it.
Hmm.
Right.
Right, right, right. Okay. So, tell me about your uh, the go-to-market journey. You said your first order was $250,000.
No, that was my first raise. My
Okay, that was your
first
first raise. Okay.
customer also, but yeah, my first customer, yeah, lack of, yeah, right, would be still under $10,000 a year,
Okay. And
right?
like,
So
who was
definitely
that?
under $1,000 a month,
Okay.
right, at start, and $10,000, yeah, under a year.
Hmm.
And today, our biggest customer would be a few $1 million a year.
Wow.
And yeah, if log and this and these are often like multi-year locked in deals, so
Hmm.
these are often like 8-digit dollar deals.
So, how did you like tell me that journey of your
Yeah,
average contract value from $10,000 to
yeah,
multi-million dollar average contract value.
yeah,
How did that happen? What worked? What was the way in which you traversed?
yeah. I think slowly and steadily but ferociously,
Okay.
right? This is not mine. I think this is the motto of Blue Origin, Graditum. I don't know how to pronounce it in Latin. Yeah, right. But yeah, so I think one of the first things we did was take a call that we're going to be an enterprise company, and this happened about 2018. So about somewhere in the 3 to 4 year mark. This happened with our work with Unilever, right? And with that, we started first changing our tech stack, right? So we needed to get, so we were one of the youngest companies in this space to get ISO certified, right? Our security stand now there's no GDPR certification, but our security and privacy standards far exceed them. So we are now a GDPR plus plus compliant, right? Same with British privacy state standards. So first step was ensuring that your product had the right components for an enterprise to even buy it. Then the second part was, as you move towards these high order values, you have to introduce new buyers. So when you are selling something at $10,000 a year, there's no procurement team. You're selling to the business guy, and that guy signs it off. When you start selling it at $100,000, you have to convince the business, then that business guy will champion it to the exec, and you will have to have that group buy-in, right? When you start selling it at $1 million, you need to start convincing the IT team that this would be the change management, and that's how it happened. You need to convert the CFO office that this is the right yield. You need to convince the procurement team that, hey, we're a stable organization, we're going to remain in the business, this is a competitive rate. And then of course you got to convince the business and product of your whole value. But in hindsight it seems obvious, or but when I was 26 when I started this, I had no idea. I'd never done an enterprise sale. Was this clean shaven guy, always called beta beta beta, right? So yeah, these were all stumblings and learnings. Like In my early days, I used to take like over like 200 domestic flights a year. I would literally just be always in front of the customer, and that's how we picked up these things.
Uh, what so if you were to hire someone to, hypothetically, you decided to hire someone fresh out of college and make him responsible for sales, what would you teach him, like in terms of how to sell,
um how to okay,
how to get those
I think
multi-million dollar deals,
yeah,
what
yeah,
would you
yeah, yeah.
teach him?
Okay, so that change. Okay, let me break it into two, three parts. Right, just first on the sell, then selling to an enterprise, and then on the multi-billion piece.
Hmm.
Right. First on selling, and this is not just to a fresher. This is something we constantly keep correcting ourselves, right, after every meeting, and we do because fundamentally we're engineers, so we love our features. We love the specifications we have built. We love what it can do. We love this one more configuration option, right? But during selling, you got to love the benefit your product will bring to the customer that the customer wants. Right? Your product may be teaching Buddhism, but does the customer want it? So build and it's just not words. You got to understand the customer's business. You got to have the right research. You got to understand the individual, right? So for example, now when we approach public market companies, we scan through their financial reports of last few years. We understand what were their goals that they had talked about, right? What is their terminology. For example, if you're selling to a pharma company, right, I think you should not call it drivers. You should call it phlebotomist, right, or field executives, right? So how much you can relate to the thing. So I've now segued from selling to selling into the enterprise piece, where I think understanding the various motivation of various buyers, right, and the various parts goes into the multi-million thing, that the value of my product to the head of the IT is very different from the value of my product to the head of sales, and both are equally right. So for the head of the IT, I talk about how we have previously engineered AWS systems, and our API uphold the similar levels of public standards. How you will get callback APIs, and how you will not need to constantly poll us. We will push back updates. How it will be less expensive. How it will be easier. How the integrations will be robust. How it will happen right the first time, right? And that's a completely different messaging to what I would do to say a CFO, where I would often go with a DCF or an NPV analysis, that hey, so we
DCF,
we are
discounted
yeah,
cash flow.
discounted cash flow and net present value, right? So we are often the most expensive solution between the competitive landscape. So we at the start, right, and that's what we tell our buyers, that look at all our historical buyers, talk to them, that we are the lowest total cost of ownership, right? Because we are saving you money, right? So often how we even bill our product is effectively 10 to 20% of what we expect to save you, and that has led us to tremendously grow in our accounts as well while cracking these large deals, right? Third, just specifically on the topic of very large enterprise deals, right? Often conventional wisdom, and stories and anecdotes had told us to appear bigger than you are, right, when cracking these very large deals. uh, in my experience, I've found it to be opposite, right? I think you can't do that. Also, yeah, it's just not the most integral thing to do. But also the buyer, right? You see, if I'm talking at the highest end of your spectrum, you're clearly punching above your weight class. You will need to find a buyer who's keen to work with a slightly smaller company, who sees value in why this younger company, who's more agile and has more recent tech, will actually solve their problem, right? So this is my key advice, that when selling your largest possible deal, please sell it to the person who knows everything about you and wants to buy, because this is a start of a 5-year relationship, right? And that person will always have power over you, because that person is giving large parts of your cash flow, right? But if then that person is somebody who understands that you're the younger, these are the advantages they get, these are the disadvantages, they can actually really help shape you. So for example, when COVID hit, I'm so grateful that two separate customers of mine called me and said, "Hey Nishit, if you need money, we will offer it at 0% interest rate of our balance sheet, but you can't go down." Right? And that's what these legit customers, and we find them both in India, we find them both in international. And of course, at that scale, everyone is a public market company, right? We're talking at the levels of Fortune 100 companies, not even Fortune 500. And I think today the best companies, the best growth companies are eager to partner with, young companies who can solve a specific problem to them, have better tech, and are humble about it.
So, like, be authentic is like one big thing to strive for in sales conversations.
Especially on your largest deal, because it can go very wrong if you don't do that, right? Like, don't put up, like, all red flags put up first, right? So to all my largest deals, I would have almost opened with this way that, just, I'm so thankful for you for presenting me an opportunity to replace a software that was my ideal when I started, right? Because all of these big companies, not like the first time they're buying the software, right? Like, they have these legacy TMSs that, I mean, Oracle, SAPs of the world is what we grew up, idolizing. And now we have become a legit competition to them, and it feels great about that. And I think I'm very thankful to my largest customers for making that happen, right?
By the time COVID hit, what kind of scale were you at? What kind of average ACVs were you doing? What was your ARR?
So when COVID hit, we were at a few hundred K. Post COVID, we have now scaled to like $1 million plus, and with the largest ones being even higher.
And what was your ARR when COVID hit?
It was in low double digits then,
Hmm.
right?
In
Yeah,
$1 million.
yes.
And what is it now?
Scale. It's scaled, so we've been fortunate,
Three digit or
right?
close?
There were, so what was tough was the 22, 23, where basically everyone imagined home deliveries to have completely shot through because of COVID, which was true, but it was true only for the existing players, right? 23 middle was the quarter when globally the least amount of software was sold,
Why is
right?
that?
Because everyone was working from home and all, and it takes time for enterprises to come back. Then they attack the mission critical things, right? So Q3 23 globally was the lowest enterprise buying activity. But that was also the time, most of the RFIs were coming, which got converted into RFPs, and now which have converted into great closures. So yeah, I think the whole contradiction about you expecting a lot of sales to happen and not happening was a bit tough. But both pre-COVID and post 20 and 24 onwards, it's been a great journey.
Are you 50 million plus today?
No,
Okay. 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 But by when do you think you'll be 50 million plus? Like,
over the next year or couple of years.
okay. Amazing. Amazing. Okay. So, what is you spoke of the legacy competition you have in the form of an Oracle and an
Yeah.
SAP. They also have like route optimization.
So for example, many of them had it at a level of pin code, right? Today, e-commerce operates with like three distribution centers within a pin code.
Right.
They had it as allocation over, optimization, right? And it was still designed for, full truck loads moving between cities on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? Not like, one vehicle doing 60 deliveries in a day in an urban environment.
So, who are your modern competitors?
And yeah, and what that has changed is that has also changed, by the way, your long haul deliveries. Now, B2B operates on this thing called B2B Express, right? Where 24-hour deliveries happen, because same, your B2B shopkeeper is also an Amazon user, right? So now he's asking Unilever, why can't you replenish my inventory every day, right? I have the same shelf space. Now you have six different kinds of Vaseline. Previously, you had only one Vaseline. How will I stock all of this inventory? You need to replenish it. So there are actually, stores in Tokyo, which, because the real estate is so costly, where replenishment happens often 3 to 4 times a day.
Wow. Okay. Right. Uh,
Right.
who are the modern competitors that you have?
Modern,
Yeah.
sure. So we have Bring in Tel Aviv as a US team. right, that operates in the North American markets. Then from India, we have Farai as a competitor. Um, we don't see them much in the North American side, but we see them a lot on the India, Middle Eastern side, right? Previously, we used to have Loginex, but over the last 2, 3 years, they haven't been that active, right? Yeah. So that would be on those new age companies. The rest of them, I think, attack much smaller companies and not in our space.
Okay, okay, okay. And what is your global split of revenues? Like, how much of your revenue comes from India? How much from US and
Sure.
other markets? And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So about 60% of our revenue comes from India plus Asia. So we also have teams in Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand. Those are important regions for us. So we actually first did nearshore before we went farshore, and about 40% of our revenue comes from the Western markets.
okay, okay, okay. So,
Yeah.
and I'm
We have
assuming
a small
West would
sliver
be
in
the
Middle East as well,
hmm,
but yeah, that's not a big region.
hmm. West would be the focus for growth, right? Because much higher ACVs there, and so how are you? How did you go global? Like, moving out of India, how did you learn to
Yeah,
sell beyond India?
yeah. Um, I think we made all the mistakes. That's how we learned how to sell. But yeah, fundamentally, we started first with nearshore strategy. Why? Our thing was to bake our product, right? If you design a consumer good for a person in California, it works everywhere globally, right? But if I design a routing system for California and Berlin, it will blow up like a high school project in most of the Asia, right? So we wanted to attack the toughest geographies for the software first and then move up market. This also makes your product very robust. Transport management systems are also systems, where which have a shelf life of 20, 30, 40 years, right? So it's important to do it right. Like often, in many of the deals that we are in, they have this policy that they will just not engage with a sub 5 year old company, right? So they don't want a 20-year-old company, but they definitely want like, a profitable, growing or a cash rich company to work with because these are very, very long term engagements, right? So we started first by nearshore, that allowed. But that led us to regions where we don't speak the local language, and we had to, convince a lot of the local, so we hired locally, right? It was initially a lot of founder-led sales, but we had like some young guys in the team at 24, right? And one of them is now a chief product officer, Pradyuman. He actually went and opened up the entire region, hired locally, got live the first few clients. How do we get the first few clients? Thankfully, India and Asia and now even US has a lot of common investor circle. So we first started approaching, portfolio companies of our investors. Or if we were working with a company in India who either had a sister company or they had operations globally. That gave us like the first customer there based on which we could then build referenceability. Word of mouth still remains like a main GTM channel for us
Okay, okay,
because
okay.
logistics is a industry where people often move companies within. So happy users are great. We have like internal systems to track our users and how they're moving across companies, and then we just reach out to them. We love putting our product first.
Hmm. Okay. How do you like you mentioned to me you had like a quarterly business review with a client before we started recording. What are the processes and mechanisms to ensure that there is no churn, that you are able to get more revenue out of existing clients? What are some of those systems that you have set up to drive that?
Yeah, yeah. So we have set up systems and SOPs around it, right? And they involve doing QBRs and thing. But our fundamental tenet is to be paranoid about on ground value, right? So, for example, let's say if we have a contract where I've been paid for 1 year upfront, right? And in the third month, I'm doing a review with the team and they mention, yeah, we are getting paid. That is completely irrelevant to us, right? That is the CFO's problem. That is not my problem, right? My problem as the product person is to ensure not just they have used, but what is the value they have derived on the ground. So let's say if there's an adoption issue that all technical integrations and all are done, but the users have not adopted, right? So we will obsess about it. We will go to the users, we'll ask them. If it's a bad user, we'll tell the guy, we'll tell the warehouse manager. If it's often the users have some genuine issues, we'll incorporate it back into the product. But fundamentally, if your product is working on the ground and adding value, right, even if your customers are complaining or raising, that's great. Cus- Customers who don't say anything are actually the customers at churn, right? All engaged customers are good. See, we have to take the accountability that we are a critical path system, right? If we go down, it won't be an inconvenience for anyone. Their business will stop. Their CEO will know in next 30 minutes on the internet, right? So we have to operate with that level of accountability on our end as well, right? And yeah, so while we have these QBRs, SOPs, those reviews to make sure, but the one thing, the one fundamental tenet we have with every technical account manager, every customer success manager, every engineering, right, are we adding value to this client?
How do you
uh,
track that? What metrics do you track to?
Thankfully, that's a very objective number, right? So you can track value in several. So there's a lot of intangible value, but thankfully there is a lot of tangible value also, right? You can just simply at the very basic level, you can track average number of kilometers per order or number of deliveries done per day by per driver, right? That's a metric your driver understands. That's a metric your CEO understands, right? Time utilization on road, right? Yeah. So there are very hard, tangible, measurable metrics which you can account for, and that's where you know that if you're adding value, even if say somebody's complaining about the user interface or thing, like that's fine, right? Like that's a, but this account is not at risk because you're adding value.
Like also
And
over
as I
time
told you, we
you
have
see
never
how.
undercut on price,
Mm,
right? So we are anyway never, because this guy will right. So it's always a pressure on us.
mm. Right, right, right. And these metrics you will track over time to see how they have improved,
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
number
We
of
we
orders.
have respectfully, bowed out from conversations where we have been pushed key, so then that's not what you're buying, right? You're not getting it. It's okay.
Hmm. You said you typically try and charge 10-20% of the amount you're saving. Uh, how
Yeah,
do you
projected.
estimate what will be the
So
saving?
in large accounts, you will rarely go live without an on-ground pilot, right? So there's an entire discovery phase that happened between 2-3 months. We get a lot of their data metrics. We simulate, right? We will also. That's why I tell them that these are the areas of first account. See, that's what at a large enterprise level, the buyers are extremely rational, right? They have a very real defined problem and they need someone to address solve it, right?
With a large enterprise,
So
the sales itself would take maybe 6
it
months.
takes long. It
Right.
takes no, could be longer,
Wow.
right?
Okay. Hmm.
Could be longer, could be a year, right? If you're doing like a eight-digit dollar deal, it can easily go over a year,
Hmm.
right? There are, and so while there is a lot of land and expand, as an organization, we equally believe in sign and expand and landing large, right? Because yeah, so in our first 5 years, we would often also just take like a small sliver, deliver, and then expand. But now we are also equally focused on landing large and sign and expand. That once we are into the organization, as soon as our integrations are starting, we'll keep asking them, if there is a parallel country we can go to, is there another division we can deploy with, right? Over waiting till land and expand. There's a I forget the name of the gentleman. He was the CRO of Anaplan, and he has a beautiful small book called Selling to the Cloud. Right, it's a great book, and this is an idea we picked up from there on focusing on sign and expand over just land and expand.
What is the difference? Land and expand means once you've deployed and
So land and
stabilized.
expand is like, so yeah, exactly. It stabilizes. You show the first value, right? Now the thing is that often takes like 6 to 8 months, right? And then the customer, okay, do this, do that, right? But you got to but instead, like the moment we close the contract, that's the next meeting we do is like who else can we talk to, right? And we will obviously that, hey, do this then, but sure, but you got to keep pushing through that,
Hmm, hmm, hmm,
right?
hmm.
And then during the contract now, yeah, we would that, hey, okay, let's look at a multi-year, right? Like we'll give you a 10% discount if it's like multi-year this scope, right? So yeah, we are also equally focused on landing large and over. We have realized that basically we can compress the sales cycle only beyond a certain point. So now I would rather take another month in the sales cycle, but lock myself in at a high digit value.
Okay, okay, okay. I assume you would. The relationships with customers would be something that you would need to obsess a lot about, right? Because essentially, like if you've converted somebody who's handling transportation in one country, you need him to champion you to other countries.
Correct.
You need him to do introductions. How do you map your relationships with customers and
Based on problem statements, right? So we solve a problem statement for an individual, and then they are, without, they are more than happy to champion us everywhere, right? Like, so we often, we generally engage with our with our stakeholders and ask that, hey, what are your KPIs, right? Like, what will help you get promoted, right? And we first focus on that success, right? Many of our customers are our customers in the next organization. Some of them have actually over time joined us. Many of their family members now work with us. Like, there have been great referrals for potential hires, right? So yeah, and see, we were outsiders to supply chain, right? We very clearly used to tell our clients that that's also another reason we have a non-opinionated system, that we know maths, right? And what we were going to give you is a system which is elegant enough to do configurations over customizations, right? That we will actually take. So for example, we have practically built our own graph language to model any kind of distribution system onto us very quickly, right? So we invest a lot in the backend infrastructure, that there is elegance in the system, that you'll be able to configure it for various use cases over having to customize it, and that slows the whole thing down, right? We focus on those individual success, and then we help. But at first you got to deliver value.
mm, configuration over customization? So essentially,
Customization.
that means that you create as much opportunity for things to be not hard coded but
Yeah.
variables,
Yeah.
as
Parameterized.
a parameterized as a philosophy of how you build the
Yes.
product, so that
Yeah.
as much as possible can be configured and doesn't need
Yeah.
any major. Okay.
What now that does something very tremendous for our clients. It leads them to a product which is robust. Many of our clients at first time often ask us for some custom bespoke stuff, right? And I tell them, you can do it, right? And our APIs are open, and this is a SI team which will do it. We can bill it transparently. I don't even want to make money on that. But if you use this with this small sacrifice, what you have is an interface which has been tested, across hundreds of devices, written with the highest standards of human computer interaction, right? And tomorrow when your use case will change, it will still adapt. So sometimes, obviously, like, 10% of the entire 100% scope in a large multi-million dollar deal, it doesn't matter, right? But fundamentally the core, right? So for example, we never write custom routing stuff for anyone, right? That's like a hard no,
Mm, mm,
right? We will focus why our routing can't do it, what is the elegance it is missing, and then we will go fix that engine itself,
mm, okay, okay.
right? So having stuff which has aged well in adds a lot of robustness, right? So hence also elegance and focus on configuration over just every customization.
What did you mean when you said you built your own graph language? What does that mean?
Sure, absolutely. So let's say, first mile logistics, last mile logistics, right? They are effectively inverse of each other, right? If I'm picking, so if I have to think of the entire logistics everywhere, right? Think of it as vertices, right? Nodes and edges connecting them. Edges have a certain relationship with the two endpoints, and there are certain activities that happen at each endpoint. So when you are talking about cash on delivery over, right? So now if you model it as an activity on the edge, instead of a credit card swipe, I can have a cash on delivery, right? So effectively, all the possible combinations of things, they are like a graph. So we have also modeled it internally. So often, we would even do in our early days things like, if somebody drew it on a whiteboard, we'll take a picture, we'll send it out to our solutions engineering, and we will actually quickly get that same model live, right? And then we will
Okay.
be able to simulate it. So that's the idea, right? Like, invest in building that core infrastructure.
Okay, okay. Uh,
So I'll tell you something live also. So right now, now our product has really expanded into this, and we noticed when we added our last module, it took us longer than we would have liked for it to start talking to everything and to integrate, right? And this means it is about time for us to start investing in a slightly more sophisticated internal data lake which can be accessed in real time and runs across. So now this year maybe we're going to invest in building that core infrastructure, which in turn will make our future application development even more
okay, fascinating. Uh, and this because you yourself are a techie and the product guy, so you are able to ensure the highest amount of optimization in how the product is built.
Yeah, I mean, and I also have like a really great team around me. My co-founder Geet, he's a great engineer who helps scale everything and make sure nothing ever breaks and has the highest level of security standards, right?
Mm.
So he's the person responsible for production engineering of everything.
Mm. Uh, why did you choose a tech co-founder instead of a business guy?
Oh, I chose a co-founder
Okay,
over choosing a tech or a business co-founder,
okay.
right? And also 100% of my circle that time involved people who code.
Okay, okay.
Right. I was like, yeah, I was writing a lot of open source code before I graduated, high school. And then there was college, and that was an engineering college. And then I joined Amazon. That's again an engineering heaven, right? And, we just wanted to build great stuff and eventually find some monetization path. And yeah, so that wasn't even a question, right? It was just like two engineers trying to build something cool.
Okay. Oh,
Right. So even today, like as I said, like our defining motto is to invent the future with amazing people.
mm,
So invent emphasizes on actually accomplishing it, not just thinking it.
mm,
Future, emphasizes on the excellence of the tech we build, on the deepness of the tech we build over any commoditized. And with emphasizes that it's a problem of scale. Two people can't do it, so you need other people and amazing people. And how do we define amazing at Locus? Effectively, the three I's. Amazing people have great ideas. Ideas sit at the intersection of knowledge and insight, right? Ideas are not just candies, right? Detailed thought through ideas. Second, they have great initiative. Initiative sits at the intersection of energy into ambition. That you should actually have that raw energy in it, right? Like you should have that both physical stamina, that mental stamina, right? And then the ambition to apply it to toughest problems. And third, integrity. Integrity is the intersection of doing the right thing in tough situations when no one's watching, right? So that's how we define amazing people. And yeah, so our core mission always is to invent the future with amazing people, and hence the focus on technical excellence.
mm. Did,
Thankfully we were all born in a decade where we could do this, right? I
hmm,
don't think this was possible in 60s, but I think it was the probable path in 2010s and 2020s, and now this will become the first path.
hmm. Uh, did this force you to become more of a business guy? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
because one
Right,
of you
one
had
of
to.
us one
Uh,
of us had to write more code, one of us had to write more email.
nice. Yeah. Nice,
Right.
nice, nice. Okay.
And I thoroughly enjoyed that, right? For me, becoming a business guy was nothing but running a bunch of small A B tests, right? I took it as a very engineering problem.
Mm,
And even at sales, right? Like how we say it is that, engineering is like a tightly coupled system. It's like a wristwatch, right?
mm,
If I do something one, I know exactly 7 degrees apart how it will happen. Sales and organizational behavior is more like the human body. It's a loosely coupled system, right? So if I do something 7 degrees apart, I have a confidence interval with a probability that these set of actions can happen. So if anything, actually imagining a loosely coupled system is kind of like a tougher problem than a very tightly coupled system, and that's how we're all very excited also about solving business problems,
uh,
right?
do you
Yeah.
like is that how you think? Like if you decide, okay, I want to expand my US sales, so like, okay, if I do this, then 7 degrees later, my sales could increase between 5 million to 15 million.
to To some extent, absolutely right. And how we try and do it at a very, very first principles level. So for
Mm.
example, when people ask us our GTM, and how we're deciding on GTM, I actually say a mathematical ratio that we go after industries with the highest cost of goods to cost of logistics ratio, right? For example, if you sell a candy, right, 40% of the cost of that good is just logistics, right? It's not
Ah,
the
okay.
right. So if
Hmm.
I optimize this, and the profit margin is very thin, it's just 1-2%. So if I optimize the cost of logistics by 10%, 40% ka 10% is 4%. That 4% is often more than the profit margin. So my buyer is massively incentivized to use a system like me.
Hmm.
Contrast this to jewelry. Even if the absolute cost of moving a necklace is very high, compared to the cost of the goods, it's nothing.
Right.
Even if I half your cost of logistics, you don't give a like, you don't care,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So how we approach our client, yeah, yeah, we like to be very first principles, very mathematical. I mean,
Hmm.
that's our edge. There are other ways, I'm sure there could be better ways, worse ways, but our edge is maths and first principles, and that's how we approach even business problems.
Give me some other examples of where you used math for GTM, for sales, for organization building, for some of these like loosely
So
coupled
the
systems.
running, sure, sure, or like some of these non-intuitive ones. Okay, so like we wrote a simple script in our early days to check for Indian companies where there is a CXO with the same surname as the founder of the company, but the CXO is under 40 years old and the company is over 40 years old, right? That effectively gave us a list of sons and daughters of promoters who have finished their education, have joined in as some chief strategy or chief innovation role, and they want to do something big. They also have the right say in the organization. And then we first started doing GTA, and those were also people we could relate a lot more to, go to the same cafes or same bars, have a conversation, right? We did the same with hiring, cross reference it. Initially when we didn't have a lot of money, so instead of going after kids from IIT and BITS like at the very early, we wanted to get great engineers, we actually cross referenced GitHub contributions, right, to like the second layer of colleges, and referenced it to certain social media posts. So that's how we zoomed in on some of our talent finding. Yeah.
Wow, amazing, amazing. Uh, how do you how do you screen people when you're hiring talent? What's your screening method?
Yeah, I don't think I can sum it up to one. I was thinking if I have like a, primary screen at each level, right? And I can definitely think of examples I use to reject people, but there is definitely not a single screening to accept people, and that both changes by the seniority and the roles, right? What I mean by methods. So, for example, if in an interview, say somebody's from a very pedigreed college, right? Or let's say I'm from bits and they are from bits and they talk a lot about bits and the past, that doesn't really bode well with us, right? Like we want to hire people who have, right, we are looking for exactness in your conversations, right? If there is a lot of ambiguity, vagueness, collectivism, right, that we are also right now biased towards more doers over managers, right? Integrity is then becomes a very, very major screen, right? So we'll put various case studies that hey, you're in Vietnam, this is the cost that has gone in this year, what happens, right? Because for many, their workplace is their temple, right? For me, my workplace is my religion, it's my god, it's my temple, right? Both the founders and many of the early team members, like they have sacrificed large parts of their personal life to make this happen. And at this point, one of the key screening that remains is that everyone we help join into the organization holds integrity at a very, very high level, right? So yeah, we don't just academically, we try and screen it in questions, right? But fundamentally, as I just mentioned prior to this, what we are looking is are for people with great ideas, great initiative, and great integrity.
Mm, mm.
Those are our three criterias.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it seems like you're looking for an engineering mindset. Like they may not be engineers, but that engineering mindset of systems thinking, of applying math,
Problem solving. Sure.
problem solving. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
Which is even more critical now, because if now you can actually define your problem and structure it into steps, as we were referencing earlier, several LLM tools become great craftsmen for you to actually execute it,
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
True.
So now you need a great ideator over a team of content writers,
Mm. True, true, true. Yeah, your team is the LLM.
right?
Mm, mm,
So yeah.
mm. So you have raised more than $80 million till date.
Hmm.
What have you learned about fundraising? Both in terms of how to raise funds, when to raise funds, should you even raise the funds to the extent which you have. Um,
Awesome. I would also add one more, in that when and how, one more dimension, which I think is even more important, is who to raise funds from,
okay.
right? And while that evolves through your fundraising journey, but my singular advice to everyone would be to always keep that as your tier one focus of who you are raising fund from. And I mean which organization and then which individual within that organization, right? I say this as a learning from complete positivity. We have fortunately been blessed with investors who, during our tough times and during our good times, were there equally supportive, and that made not just surviving through the tough times, but to focus on the right things like the team and product so much easier. So if you are looking to build a company for a long time, you have to understand that an average investor founder relationship may outlast an average marriage, right? So it's really important who you raise funds from. And that is where, a lot of institutionalized seed and venture capital, right? Like, why not take a debt from the bank, right? Why not, right? It's important to raise funds from people who have, built companies or seen multiple companies, go from 0 to 100. They have the right guidance, and also in the most critical moments they have the right compassion, right? So yeah, I would strongly focus as much on who to raise funds from.
Okay.
Then comes on when to raise funds from, right? uh, Very, very, very early on, somebody had told me this one line which kind of really, really stuck with me, which was, "पैसा मांगोगे तो ज्ञान मिलेगा, ज्ञान मांगोगे तो पैसा मिलेगा," right?
Very
So
nice.
right. Yeah, so I think we only did demos for our fundraising, very oddly.
Okay.
Okay. Every time, the few, and as I mentioned, like, we keep looking at our A/B test, right? Every time we started with a pitch, it didn't, result in the fastest conversation. But every time there was either an investor who has a portfolio company where we have already delivered value. And as I was mentioning, one thing, sometimes for a customer reference call now, we can be like, these are our customers, go call them, right? Like, you're right. So either you had delivered value, or we had started with a demo and vision, right? And people had bought into that product, into that vision, that okay, this is cool, right? Then, are there any tricks of the trade? Of course. So I'll give you one, which which is always to, somehow make your investors experience your product. So for my seed round, where we needed the most credibility, and nobody else was using the thing, I would always go and meet the investor over asking the investor to come to, right? First, I will go meet the investor. And this is 2014, right? And when I'm going to meet the investor, I'll send them my own tracking link of RideSafe, right? So now when they're waiting for me, they can actually see me coming. They've experienced the product. They've experienced the value of the product, right? It has actually solved, some anxiety of them of when we are coming. And I'll try and meet them outside the office. So they also have to come somewhere, right? So we'd meet in a mall, in a restaurant, always just send them a tracking link, right? And 100% of those conversations after that was, just about discussing the instruments of the deal, but I know, like, they were sold,
Amazing. Amazing. Okay.
right? Then to address your third piece, how much to raise and think,
Hmm.
I would say that, raise a little more than you need, not much more than you need, right? One, it's risk capital. Second, it always takes you a little more than you think. Third, if you have excess capital, there are always legit growth areas that you can build immediate adjacencies to, right? So I think raising extra capital isn't the bad thing. Spending that extra capital without an abandon may be a bad thing,
Mm. Okay. Okay.
right?
Uh, your last round of $50 million
Yeah.
sounds
We still
excessive.
have a large part of it, by the way.
Right. 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 I mean, that sounds
Yeah.
excessive
No,
to me.
not.
Like, was it the post-COVID bubble where valuations were
Hmm.
like really
So
high?
actually, our round, for what it's worth, would be on the smaller end during those rounds that were happening. As a matter of fact, we were also offered 2x of the money we raised, right?
Right.
We decided to raise half,
Mm.
right? And I think we have utilized this capital well, and we are now also investing in very interesting growth areas. So yeah, I'm very fortunate for having the opportunity to raise that capital and having great investors to raise that from, right? Like, often what happens is when you raise extra capital, either you have to compromise on the quality of investors. We ended up raising from, Qualcomm and GIC, like the sovereign funds, right? Or you have to optimize on certain, or you have to sacrifice on certain terms internally, like liquidation preferences and all. Our investors were very graceful, and it's actually great terms. And as part of this round, they actually even offered us the board majority. So yeah, I think with the benefit of hindsight, it was a great round done at the right quantum of capital, and it had allowed us the right cushion to go through COVID and not just survive but thrive out of that. One thing that we did do was be cautious with that money, right? Like most of our peers ballooned to somewhere between 1,000 to 2,000 people during those years, right? We actually never crossed 300.
Wow. Mm.
Yeah.
Though this does put pressure on you, right? I mean, the more you raise, the
I
more.
sought that pressure.
Okay.
I think it's very unfair to say that investors put pressure on you, right? You go to investors to raise capitals to reach your ambitions, right? You seek that pressures. Investors bring in accountability. I don't think
Right.
they bring in pressure,
Mm. Okay.
right? I know of very few investors who say when they signed up on a deal and it was at say at a X growth rate without any without any significant change or significant change in capital, and would randomly come and say do 3x without spending more, right? They would try and hold you to X, and that's what brings accountability, and that's how you graduate into a professional CEO. And I think that's a very good thing.
Mm. Like you have to give projections, and they hold you accountable to the
Yeah,
projections you gave them.
yeah, absolutely,
Mm.
right.
Right. The projections are in
and
your
and and
backup,
and,
what
and
you.
that was a critical journey for us to transform. Personally, I would say from a founder to a CEO.
Mm.
And while I did stumble originally, I'm very grateful to have that opportunity and that time to get better at it.
How did you stumble?
Oh, our projections used to be off. Simple,
Okay. Like you were
right?
overly
So
optimistic.
yeah, and also see, I was a sports captain, right? Like that's how I started. I knew how to lead, 10 members, 7 member sports teams, and run it with that aggression, right? And it was a journey for me to transform. I have four stakeholders, right? Investors is one of them. Team, clients, investors, media, right? And how I interacted with each of them, and primarily with my team, definitely transformed as I took that journey from being a founder to a CEO.
Like you were overly aggressive initially before you realized that the larger the organization, the
Yeah,
more
yeah, right.
patient.
Because like initially you operate as a sports captain,
Mm.
and then you learn to recognize that you can. I forget who said it, but you can never change someone's mind while angry,
Mm. Mm.
right?
Mm.
And yeah, I think also as the years went by, I personally got the maturity of focusing on winning the war over winning the battle.
What is the difference
Right.
between the two? Like how
you, you
how has
can you
your
can
mindset?
shout at someone in a meeting, right? Prove to everyone that you are the smartest or whatever, right? But did it accomplish anything? Will the next time that happen not happen, right? But if you could take that aggression, even if it is called out then, but follow it up with making sure that there's actual change in SOP, or you write the email differently, then it results into action, and then you have actually one what has happened, right? Like
Mm.
then you have made a meaningful change.
What kind of a boss are you to work with? What would your subordinates be saying about you?
I would say they would call me a fair person, right? I definitely have high expectations, right? But we have created a company for 2% of the folks who
Mm,
also want to have an accelerated career paths.
mm,
But yeah, I'm very confident my team would call me a very fair manager, biased hopefully towards excessive rewards. But yeah,
mm. Okay,
right.
nice, nice,
And
nice,
I
nice.
personally, constantly, the one thing that I personally try and do is lead primarily by example, right? So yeah, if I'm not able to solve a problem statement for my team, I know I will not earn their trust, right? So I
Mm,
believe everyone needs to earn their designation daily.
mm, 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 mm. Okay. Uh,
At some point, I used to say that, for example, back in 2017, you would have us, I would also say that hopefully they think of me as a great engineer or great this, right? But now we have evolved to a point where all my direct reports are much better functionally at what they do than I do, right? I can't coach them functionally. My job is to empower them and make sure they're not blocked,
mm,
right?
mm,
And identify attribute to the right root causes. And that's where the fairness comes from.
You're more of the architect now, like designing the
I'm
organization and.
I, uh, I'm the enabler,
Mm,
right? Like if for example product and engineering over a feature set is, I'm the one who would arbitrate it, make sure both see the same point, and that same happens between say product and sales, right?
mm,
As we were talking about disagree and commit, my primary responsibility is to get people to commit on the same thing and see each other's side, right? That's
mm,
the advantage I have, right? That I get to sit on data sets and interact with both sides of the equation, and allowing me to build empathy on both sides. And then
mm.
can I transfer and educate one side about the problems of the others?
There were two ways to monetize what you have built. One is your way of SaaS, and the other way is of taking a share from transaction, which I would say is like the Shiprocket way. Um, uh, from what I understand, Shiprocket,
Shiprocket is in operations. So
they
Shiprocket has physical warehouses and all,
right.
right?
Yes, 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 yes. You're right. Yeah.
We don't do physical ops.
Although, like, let's say asset light Shiprocket, one may not necessarily
Sure.
need to
At
own.
time, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, one may not need to
For the
own
sake.
the warehouses, but that could be the other way, like the transaction way.
No, that's still, so see, it's about who is owning the responsibility of operations. Whether you're
Hmm,
asset light or asset heavy, that's the operating model.
okay.
Right, so for example, I only, like, my revenue to my customer is the revenue that is coming to me. It is not the entire cost of the delivery that I then take from.
Right. Yeah. What you have built with minor changes could be the Shiprocket route because
Absolutely, it
you're
could be.
essentially
We
running
just
the
made a
whole.
choice to not be in operations. Absolutely. We actually got like several financial offers, that hey, why don't you start like an operations arm, start logistics. And especially, during the cost of capital between 18 to 21, we had several options to ingest more capital and launch a logistics company.
Hmm. So why didn't you?
Just
Why
the
stick to
DNA of
SaaS
the team.
instead? Okay.
Just the DNA of the team, sir. Right.
Hmm.
uh, I think we are much better managing technology than we are at managing other humans, right?
Hmm.
We
I
fundamentally
mean,
at the core.
it's still an
Huh,
engineering problem, right? Like it's just about tweaking incentives and managing execution.
systems.
And,
Absolutely, absolutely right. We still think our edge lies in understanding even more complex technology and adapting and simplifying it to the use cases. Right. So we love understanding the use cases, but the entire DNA of the team has always been towards focus more and more around technology side of things.
I mean, uh, Amazon is a technology company or an operations company. What would you call it?
Amazon is a $1 trillion company. These things, these things, dilute away at that scale, right?
True,
I
true, true,
mean,
true.
you're not gonna call Google a cab company, right? Google is a technology company. Just because they run Waymo, they're not a cab company,
Right,
right?
right, right.
So that's been our DNA and focus.
Mm. No, I mean just that the total addressable market is so much larger the moment you
Yeah.
get into the transaction instead of
It
just
becomes a different market, right? Then scaling internationally is much more complicated than, say, scaling with a technology solution. So today we
right.
operate in at least 20 plus different countries, right? And within them, the clients effectively operate operations in 30 plus countries, right? And that gives us a very good global scale, global problem statements, right? And
Mm,
that's what excites the team. That's what we had committed to ourselves, to our investors, and our team member, that
mm,
we shall focus on being on a great technology company and phase one in the transport space.
mm. Okay, okay, okay.
Right.
Understood. Okay.
So today, for example, as we are gaining more and more retail customers, and we are building, we are getting into the adjacencies of pre-cart conversion, right? We may end up designing a great technology company verticalized further into retail. So that's how we look at expanding our TAM. But I think we'll stick with our first love of tech.
Mm. Are you planning to go down market, like more SMEs, or are you planning to just
No,
continue to focus on enterprise
yeah,
customers
we
and
have actually, yeah, we have been going up market over the years, and we plan to stay on that trajectory.
okay, okay, okay. Got it,
Also
got
in
it.
SMEs now, I expect a lot of build versus buy pressures also, right? Especially also as the cost of development of basic systems have gone down.
Ah, okay. And this is the impact of AI. Like through
Yep, yep.
AI, you can
Yes,
build
cost
instead
of
of buying.
commoditized development has gone down, right? So if so, what ChatGPT can't do today is produce an algorithmic code like our routing engine, right, or even close to anything to that. Right. So I want to go to customers for whom that is a core differentiating factor, and then I can charge even more, because then for me also cost of other development is lower, and I can give you like a wide variety of application.
Mm. How is AI? How are you using AI? Is it only for your internal product building,
Everywhere.
or is it?
Oh no, absolute. So as a matter of fact, Locus did a public conversation about Chat GPT 3, not GPT 3.5, and that was actually back all the way in 2021. Greg Brockman had to, personally had given me an access key then. So we had been really experimenting and adopting this through and throughout. And for the first year, which was 2024, right? Our core goal was to first adopt it in the organization before even in the product,
So what are
right?
examples of that? Adopting
Yeah,
in organization.
and then in the product, it is both embellishing at each level. I was giving you example of that proof of delivery where it is,
Mm,
but also building an entire agentic TMS itself, which is the big, right? So now I will cover each of these three. First is, say, adopting it through and throughout the organizational level, right? Let's talk about, your people and culture. You can always write a slightly better hiring post, right?
right.
Now something like a chat GPT can help you craft that, right? Same goes for marketing, messaging, communications, design, right? Then there is, of course, engineering development, right? Um, Sales demos, right? Previously doing custom demos would take a lot of effort, but now, because you can create like commoditized pages very quickly, you can have a lot of custom demo which is not linked to your product, right? So let's say if you're building a you want to show how it will work with a checkout page. I can just today recreate the checkout page of the company I'm pitching, which previously had to go through engineers, right? So our first thing was, if I could share my screen, you will actually see that, just 2 days back we have said, to the guys who lead like the internal change, we have asked them to educate all the execs on how to make an LLM calls, right? Because look at, for example, my finance team. So my CFO was visiting me last week because we were doing the annual planning, and we realized that, a lot of our questions are scenario modeling. That what happens if I increase my investments in North America? What happens if I double up my increase investments in Southeast Asia? And all of this could actually be modeled on that. So the finance team should actually create like a scenario modeler, and now you don't need to sanitize the data as much, because these LLMs can take a bit of unstructured, unsanitized data and structure it back out for you, right? So it first needs to get embellished everywhere in the organization, then it needs to get embellished everywhere in the product, right? That how does each text box, each default becomes a bit smarter. If you have uploaded me your input data, can I detect an anomaly that a table does not, it cannot be 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter? This is an input error, otherwise it will create a loading issue, right? So then the second is embellishment through each small functionality, each small screen throughout the product, right? Because you see, fundamentally, each new tool is like electricity. If you're not going to put a bulb of an application at the end of it, you're going to shock your user, right? That's not what, right? You can't sell it for the sake of it, right? It had to convert into application. And now comes the third piece, where so a lot of our users operate in multiple of their local languages, right? So fundamentally, if you think of it, in logistics, a warehouse manager knows that they want to look at all the orders that got delayed yesterday, correct? Every 5 years we go and teach them it on a new user friendly software.
Mm.
Our thesis is AI is the new UI, right? That user interfaces will become obsolete into intent interfaces. So now what we have built is a full voice interaction with our system. And when I say voice interaction, you can say stuff like, मेरे मेरे ड्राइवर्स की प्रोफाइल फोटो मत चेंज करने दो, and then it will
Ah,
find what is the option in the desktop, and
yeah.
it moves the mouse, it shows you where to click, how to do that, and then it responds back to you, right? So we have completely agentified using our system,
Mm.
because what we realized is our users know what they need to learn how to use it on the user. It's much similar to like when initially computers came. My father would come and say, hey, can you get me my SBI balance? He knows what he wants to do, he just don't know how to use that user interface. But
Yeah.
today AI can bridge that, and that's actually where we have done like the most insane amount of R&D this year, right? And we're also launching it out as a separate company, because effectively what we have built is a great computer used for embedded SaaS. Now any SaaS application can effectively launch a co-pilot in 1 day, not 0 days, but 1 day. And this co-pilot will not be like actual just a question answer. No, it can actually take actions on behalf of you, right?
Mm.
So we have like a wild version of it only for internal, so while working, I would actually say, hey, can you get me like a dal khichdi on Swiggy, and it would do that.
Wow.
I would say, hey, can you get me a cab after the next meeting, and it would do that, right? We're not
Wow.
launching a B2C extension publicly, that's only for our use. But what we are doing is launching as a B2B service. So because change management and training becomes such a complex thing, the idea of it also came via this only, man. 12th February, we have actually a client in Mumbai, India Gift Portal, and their CEO had the right concept that, hey, during 14th Feb Valentine's Day rush, all of my external carriers will not be able to maintain the 30-minute SLA. There is this one carrier X which is typically expensive, but you override everything for 14 15 to this X. Okay. The CEO told their VP operations. Their VP operations told my VP customer success. My VP customer success told my technical account manager. They did it on the same day. Everybody is very happy.
Mm.
Okay. When this technical account manager was doing it, I was just so happened I was in the office and standing there, and I realized they were doing it on the GUI. There was a GUI option to do this, right?
Uh, Graphic user interface.
On our dashboard there was a
Yeah.
on our customer dashboard there was an option to just overwrite it,
Huh.
but it's hidden under the settings. It's an esoteric option,
Yeah. 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 And because you made it so configurable, so
yes,
it will
yes,
always be
right.
challenging to find
And
everything.
now I'm like, we're gonna spend effort automating these tickets, but the problem is this ticket should never be created,
Mm.
right? Tickets effectively become a model of interaction in enterprise software,
Yes. Yes.
and we
Yes.
want to
So
just
true.
fundamentally append it,
Mm.
right? Your user interface, so now everything effectively gets substituted with a search bar and a mic icon,
Mm.
right? The future belongs to intent interfaces, not user interfaces, right? We can now just explain our intent to the system and they'll get it. By the way, this is how traditionally every expert user has used it, right? Developers use it over a command line. Gamers have a console, a console that drops down and we type in. Expert Photoshop users type action script. It's just that for non-expert users, these were very unforgiving systems. With LLMs, we can create extremely forgiving text-based interfaces, right? These are actually natural language interfaces, not keyboards and mouse, right? So we got to bring natural language back to computers.
Mhm. How would this learn everything which a SaaS product can do?
Yes. So that's exact. I mean, so it runs, it scrolls all the interactions, it maps out the site maps, right? It understands the intent. We have built a critique agent, which, so for example, knowing when an action is done is a very complex problem to solve, right? So doing the task is relatively easier versus knowing when the task is done and if it is done correctly,
Mm, mm, mm,
right? So we would use multiple LLMs, we cross reference, we run critique. Then you have to have other tools. So for example, you can say things like, hey, when this route plan is created, can you just take a screenshot and email me, right?
mm,
Why should you
mm.
be sitting and monitor?
Right,
Yeah, so it
right.
makes the whole system really fun.
Mm,
There's a lot of tooling infrastructure to make these things like screenshotting, email, and that
mm,
happen. Then there's obviously we rely on everything from Claude to OpenAI for analyzing the dom to understand. Then you got to put in a lot of engineering to make sure nothing hallucinates, right?
mm,
Because now you're often doing actions which take 16 steps. You hallucinate at any one, everything goes off the table,
mm. Right.
right? Your actions need to be explainable to the users, right? We don't want to call magic functions at the back end because we also want to educate the user, right? So yeah, it's we are launching it with some of our already existing customers. We are seeing like great adoption. We have launched a velvet rope for onboarding non-locus clients on this, and yeah, we'll be putting it up in Q1.
What do you
So it's
mean
called
velvet?
Mycroft.
What do you mean
Velvet
velvet rope?
velvet rope, as in like we're not because Mycroft, we made it initially for Locus and now we are externalizing it. So and we have more demand than we can right now really address because we're a small team on that. So we are just how you have that velvet, like
Invite
that
only,
VIP velvet.
basically.
Yeah, just a
Yeah.
launch strategy. Yeah.
Okay,
So we
okay,
are
okay.
collecting interest and each in Q1 going after selectively to put it out.
So Mycroft could
And
be
obviously
your
starting with Locus.
Mycroft
Yes,
could be
Mycroft
your
will start with the
AWS.
most expert user of
Uh,
Locus, and then exactly.
I mean, this could be your AWS, like how Amazon has the core e-commerce,
Yeah,
but AWS
absolutely.
spun
That's
out
a
of that.
yes,
Uh,
yes. You can never take the AWS out of an AWS engineer.
yeah. So you intend to like build out a full team to sell this and to really scale this
Yes,
up as a separate
yes,
standalone
yes.
SaaS business.
So this is one of the ways Locus is using its capital. So now Locus has actually
Okay.
effectively started it out as a team, invested in this company, right? And then yeah. Okay. So we have a great culture of both hiring good founders as well as backing the team members who leave the organization, right?
Hmm.
So we have like a bunch of other startups that have started out of ex-Locus guys, and not only do we support it, we help them close their entire first round. We will put in a check, either personally.
Wow, amazing, amazing, amazing. So let me end with this. What's your advice to founders starting in 2024? I mean, any advice any founder might have given 2 years ago also is not relevant today because of so many changes. So for a founder starting in 2024, what's your advice?
It's the title of the book by Mark Anderson. The hard thing about hard things is that there is no pattern, right? So don't unnecessarily search for one, don't unnecessarily seek for one, right? If you're starting, one thing I would definitely say is get a co-founder, right? Having a co-founder dramatically increases your probability of success. Apart from all functional needs, I would also say just having somebody to grab a beer with when you're really down, right? And that happens. So get a co-founder, and there is no better time to build than today. Don't worry about patterns, right? If you were looking for a technical co-founder, you have AI. If you were looking for a marketing co-founder, you have AI, right? Like so, effectively, there are one thing I would say, and this is what I recently mentioned at the NVIDIA stage with Jensen as well, that all labor cost arbitrage is gone. So your only strategy of success has to be excellence. It can't be I will undercut the price or I'll be cheaper, right? Your strategy, you will be competing at a global level, and your only strategy of success is excellence, right? But no better time than November 2024 to build.
Mm. Why is that?
Because a lot of drudgery stuff has gone away, right? Like now when you think of an idea and you can conceptualize it and detail it, you can actually very quickly get to a working prototype,
Yeah. Mm.
right? So even say, right, like like if I've thought of a blog article, I would now put it up in a 10 bullet points, focus on that. Over time I've evolved my prompts that this is the kind of style I write and all. I would give it, and it would give me a very good draft back that I will then again go word by word, edit out a few lines, right? So that whole inertia of just sometimes sitting and nothing coming out, that has gone. So your response cycles have become much shorter. So
Mm.
everything is a lot more fun today than it was a year back, right? Everything from
True.
writing a
True.
hiring post to writing a code to writing an organizational memo, right, to learning about anything, right? Like I use like that advanced voice mode quite a bit, right, while I want move to learn about something. It's yeah. So everything is just a tiny bit more fun because it's a bit more convenient. So that's what I'm saying. Like no better time than now to build.
What is your personal content consumption habit? How do you consume content to learn stuff?
I so I have a dedicated time called wandering, right? So I split my time in like workout, work, family, and wandering, and I really cherish this time in wandering. One of the best things I did over the last 3 years for my personal content and mental health was to gravitate largely towards long reads, right? So often now I will just send stuff to Kindle and read it at night on a Kindle, outside of other screens, right? Yeah.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I do want, yeah, I think this that wandering is a very critical part of my day and something I truly relish.
So
And that's
wandering
where
is
I
like
think I
you
write.
just read
Yeah.
anything that interests you.
I'm typically, I always have topics I'm, currently uh, anxious about not knowing enough. For example, right now, one of my things is, the whole human computer interaction, right? Like the brain machine interface. This was something I used to have a lot of interest during my undergrad years, but now I haven't really caught up with all the stuff that Neuralink does. So, been reading all of those bio papers. Yeah.
Wow, fascinating. I noticed you don't have anything there for entertainment, like for your Netflix time and all.
My entertainment involves being outside, right? So I love going for a run with my dog. I do a lot of gardening. This year I was able to produce 20% of my vegetables during the summers.
Wow,
uh, I as an amateur, I race tracks, I fly a single engine turboprop. Yeah, so all my fun involves being outside in nature.
wow, amazing, inspiring. Thank you so much for your time, Nishit. It was a real pleasure.
Same, Akshay. Thank you. It was a wonderful conversation, and I clearly didn't realize where the 2 hours went. And thank you for holding up that energy on the table.